I stood outside the mansion I used to call home, holding my father's favorite sweet potato casserole. And they shut the door in my face. Through the window, I saw my best friend sitting in my seat, my sister raising a toast, and my parents pretending I didn't exist. They erased me like I never belonged. But what they didn't know was that I had the documents. The emails. The proof. They built their empire on lies, and I was about to bring the whole damn thing down. You want to know how family loyalty turned into corporate betrayal? Stay with me. This gets darker than you think. My name is Tess Morgan. I'm 31 years old, and up until last year, I was the daughter everyone in Savannah envied. The Morgan family name opens doors in this town. We sit on charity boards, sponsor city events, and run one of the most prestigious investment firms in the Southeast, Morgan & Hunt Capital. My father, Charles Morgan, built it from the ground up. My mother, Loretta, sculpted our image like a PR machine in pearls. And my older sister Fiona? She was the golden girl. Harvard-educated, polished, and obedient. Then there was me. I didn't want to be another cog in the Morgan machine. I had ideas. Creative ones. I saw branding and client experience not as fluff, but as the soul of modern business. So while Fiona managed portfolios, I built campaigns. While she memorized numbers, I connected with people. And for a while, that was tolerated. Barely. I studied at NYU, worked in the private sector in Atlanta, then came home to join the family firm, Morgan & Hunt, as the director of brand and client relations. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could prove that my value wasn't in spreadsheets, but in vision. That I could belong in this family on my own terms. I was wrong. I was never truly one of them, not the way they defined it. Not obedient enough. Not quiet enough. Not willing to look the other way. It all started to unravel when I stumbled across some anomalies. At first, they looked like innocent mistakes. Small inconsistencies in account statements, strange internal transfers. But when I pulled the threads, what I found wasn't innocent at all. Offshore accounts. Fabricated performance reports. A system of misdirection so seamless, you'd think it was designed by the devil himself. I brought it to my father. Not in anger. Not to accuse. Just to ask. To understand. He didn't even flinch. Stay in your lane, he said. You do branding, Tess. Leave the numbers to people who understand them. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just uninvited to the table. I had never really been welcome in the first place. From that day forward, I was frozen out. Locked out of meetings I used to lead. My accounts reassigned. My access restricted. I was still showing up at the office every morning, but I was already a ghost. And then came the betrayal I never saw coming. From someone I trusted more than anyone. But we'll get there. Right now, I want you to understand one thing. I didn't burn the bridge. I built it, walked it, and begged for space on the other side. But when they set it on fire with me still on it, I did what I had to do. I survived the flames, and I took the matchbox with me. It started with a spreadsheet. Just a routine client performance report I was reviewing for an upcoming pitch. One of our long-standing clients, the Carrington Trust, had requested a presentation on their portfolio history. Nothing unusual. I'd handled reports like this 100 times before. But that day something caught my eye. A line item, adjusted performance reallocation, showing up in 3 consecutive quarters. That wasn't standard language. Not in any of our reporting templates. At first, I figured it was a clerical error. Maybe something our back-office team in Atlanta had mislabeled. I emailed Marissa, my best friend since college, who also happened to work in account management at the firm. Hey, I wrote. Noticed something odd in Carrington's Q2 file. Mind double-checking. She replied a few hours later, casually brushing it off. Yeah, it's just a temporary shift while we rebalance the portfolio. Nothing to worry about. But something about that answer didn't sit right. It was too fast. Too rehearsed. And Marissa, she never used phrases like nothing to worry about. We built our friendship on late-night honesty and a shared hatred for corporate jargon. So I dug deeper. Within the week, I found similar language in other client reports. Quiet shifts. Reallocations. Red flags hiding in plain sight. I compiled everything into a folder titled Inquiries, and printed a few pages to take to my father. I still remember that meeting. I walked into his office, floor-to-ceiling windows, dark mahogany shelves filled with awards and leather-bound books. He didn't even look up when I sat down. "I've been reviewing some reports," I began. "There are inconsistencies I think we should look into." He looked at me for the first time then. Sharp, cold. Not curious. Not concerned. Just irritated. "What reports?" I handed him the file. He flipped through the pages for less than a minute before snapping them shut. "Those accounts are managed personally by me," he said flatly. "You don't need to worry about them." "But," I started. "No, Tess." He cut me off. "This is beyond your scope. You're in marketing. Stay there." His words stung more than I expected. Not because he dismissed the concern, though he absolutely did, but because it confirmed what I'd been denying for years, that no matter how hard I worked, how much I proved myself, I would never be seen as more than decoration. A nice face to put on brochures. A last name for social optics. That meeting was the first crack. The next day, my access to certain accounts vanished. Passwords changed. Files gone. My name was removed from internal threads and presentation decks I had created from scratch. And the worst part? Marissa stopped meeting me for lunch. No explanation. Just cancelled plans. Again and again. I didn't know it then, but the silence was the sound of loyalty shifting behind closed doors. They were closing ranks. And I was officially on the outside looking in. I didn't resign that week. Not yet. But something inside me shifted. I stopped trying to earn their approval, and started preparing for something else. I didn't know what, exactly. But I knew I needed to protect myself. Because what was happening wasn't just office politics. It was calculated, coordinated, and personal. The next few weeks at Morgan & Hunt felt like navigating a minefield. Meetings I used to lead now happened without me. Clients I had nurtured for years were being reassigned to junior staff, or worse, to Fiona. When I walked into the break room, conversations stopped. Smiles faded. Doors closed faster behind me than they opened. But I smiled anyway. I showed up early. Stayed late. Wrote meticulous notes after every client call. Every file I created, I saved twice. Once on the company drive, once on a private, encrypted hard drive. I didn't want revenge. I wanted receipts. The act of resistance didn't come in the form of confrontation. It came in silence. In observation. In documentation. It came when I walked into the office on a rainy Tuesday and found that my keycard no longer granted access to the analytics wing, where the high-level accounts were managed. I didn't make a scene. I just nodded at the intern pretending not to notice and walked back to my office. But later that night, I called Grant Novak. We'd met at a financial ethics conference the year before, in Charleston. He worked with the SEC's Atlanta division, investigating white-collar fraud and securities manipulation. I didn't know him well, but I remembered one thing he said during a panel discussion. If you ever suspect something's off inside your firm, don't ignore it. Document everything. The truth will need a witness. He picked up on the third ring. "Tess Morgan," he said, surprised. "Didn't expect to hear from you." "I might have something," I said quietly. "Something real. But I'm not sure what I'm looking at yet." "Start with what you know," he replied. "And be careful who you trust." That night, I opened a manila folder labeled Backup, TM, and placed it in the bottom drawer of my nightstand, beneath a stack of old Vogue magazines. Inside were printed emails, flagged transactions, handwritten notes, breadcrumbs leading toward a truth I wasn't ready to face yet. But I would be. The next morning, I wore my best power suit and walked into that building like I owned it, because in some ways, I did. I was the Morgan who still believed in integrity. In accountability. In doing what was right, even if it cost everything. I didn't know it yet, but my act of quiet resistance would soon collide with their growing desperation. And when it did, someone was going to break. It just wasn't going to be me. Thanksgiving had always been sacred in my family. It wasn't just a holiday. It was a performance. The Morgan house in Savannah would glow with designer candles and imported centerpieces. Every plate matched. Every seat had a place card. My mother planned the menu down to the texture of the napkins. And no matter what was going on in our lives, Attendance was mandatory. So when I called my mother the week before and asked, "Same time as always?" and she answered with a cool, "Of course, dear. 2 o'clock sharp." "We're something classic," I believed her. Because despite the silent war brewing between us, despite the company politics, despite the tension, I still thought I was family. So I spent the morning preparing my father's favorite, sweet potato casserole with cinnamon pecan topping. I even used the family recipe card, the one written in my grandmother's handwriting. I dressed in a navy cashmere wrap dress, paired with simple pearl earrings, subtle, elegant, exactly the kind of look my mother always approved of. And I drove, heart pounding, to the mansion I had grown up in. As I turned onto the long brick-lined driveway, something felt off. Too many cars. Too early. I spotted my sister Fiona's black Range Rover. My father's vintage Jaguar. Even Marissa's white Audi, already parked and gleaming like betrayal in the sun. I parked 2 houses down and walked slowly, balancing the casserole and a bottle of wine from one of my clients' vineyards. I rehearsed opening lines in my head, compliments for the table, a gentle joke about politics to break the tension, something warm to bridge the silence. I climbed the familiar steps, took a breath, and rang the bell. I could hear laughter from inside, the soft hum of classical music. Forks on china. For a moment, it almost sounded like home. Then the door opened. My father stood there in a navy blazer, crisp shirt, expression blank. My mother beside him, wearing a silver silk dress and her coldest smile. "What are you doing here, Tess?" my father asked flatly. I blinked. "I brought the casserole. You said dinner's at 2. "There's been a misunderstanding," my mother said quickly, her voice tight. "This year, you're not invited." The words knocked the breath out of me. Behind them, I could see the dining room. The table was set. The candles were lit. My seat, was occupied by Marissa, laughing next to Fiona like they'd shared that spot forever. I tightened my grip on the casserole dish. "But I baked this. It's Dad's favorite." "That won't be necessary," he said, stepping back. "We have dessert covered." And with that, he began to close the door. "Why?" I managed, my voice cracking. "You know why," my mother whispered. Then the door shut. Heavy. Final. I stood there, motionless on the steps, casserole growing cold in my arms, staring at the house I used to belong to. In that moment, something broke. But not me. Not completely. Because pain, when left unchecked, becomes fuel. And I was about to burn the whole damn legacy down. I didn't cry on the steps. I didn't scream or beg, or ask them to reconsider. I walked. Back down the stone pathway. Past the Range Rover. Past Marissa's Audi. Past the voices of people I once called family echoing through the walls of that perfect house. My heels clicked against the pavement like a drumbeat, holding back the storm rising in my chest. By the time I reached my car, I couldn't feel my fingers. I placed the untouched casserole on the passenger seat like it was a body, then gripped the steering wheel with both hands. Through the windshield, I could still see the flickering candlelight from the dining room, the silhouettes of people laughing. People who had smiled in my face while orchestrating my erasure. Marissa knew. Fiona knew. My parents had planned this down to the damn seating chart. And that's when it happened. That pain I'd been swallowing for months, the confusion, the guilt, the desperate hope for reconciliation, it all curdled into something colder. Sharper. I wasn't the angry daughter anymore. I was the inconvenient witness. And inconvenient witnesses get silenced. Unless they speak first. I pulled out my phone and opened the encrypted folder I had started building months ago. Screenshots. Email threads. Investment documents with fuzzy language and fabricated figures. Nothing flashy on its own. But together? Together they were a map. One that pointed straight to a legacy built on lies. At the bottom of the file was a contact card I'd saved but never used. Grant Novak. SEC Atlanta. I stared at it for a long time. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about clients whose retirements were being gambled with. About employees who trusted the Morgans with their careers. About a system that punished truth and rewarded silence. I tapped the call button. He answered on the third ring. "Tess. I have everything," I said. "The proof. The emails. The transfers." I didn't want to see it before. I tried to believe it wasn't what it looked like, but... You're sure? He interrupted, his tone shifting instantly. Because once this begins, it doesn't stop. I'm sure, I replied, surprising myself with how steady I sounded. Then we meet tomorrow. 8 a.m. Bring everything. After the call, I drove with no destination. Just needed space. A place where I could think. I ended up at the edge of the Savannah River. The water shimmered under the moonlight, calm and indifferent. I used to come here as a kid when things got loud at home. When my father's temper boiled over and my mother's silence became a weapon. Back then, I thought the world outside that mansion was scary. Now I realized, that house was the real danger. And tomorrow, I'd start setting the truth free. Even if it destroyed everything they'd built. Even if it destroyed what was left of us. Because some legacies deserve to burn. Morning came early. I barely slept. At 7:45 a.m., I walked into a nondescript office building just outside downtown Savannah. Grant met me in the lobby with 2 black coffees and eyes that had seen too many stories like mine. We didn't make small talk. Inside a private conference room, I handed him the folder, along with 2 encrypted USB drives. He connected his laptop, started scanning files, and within minutes his expression turned from curious to concerned. You weren't exaggerating, he muttered. These transfers alone. Offshore routing through shell firms in the Caymans? This is serious. He kept scrolling. And scrolling. Every page I had collected, every annotated report, every flagged account, was now evidence. But the moment that made my stomach twist was when he paused at a thread of internal emails. This one, he said. This isn't just fraud. This is obstruction. I leaned over to read. It was a message from my father, sent weeks before I'd resigned. Limit Tess's access to the Ferguson and Kingsley accounts. Her position doesn't require financial transparency. Loop Marissa in. She's been helpful in keeping her distracted with the new brand initiatives. My breath caught. Marissa. My best friend. The woman who'd studied with me in college, cried with me through breakups, toasted my promotion, was feeding information about me behind my back. Keeping me distracted. And she'd done it while smiling in my face. Grant kept going. There's more, he said grimly. The same week you left the firm, there was a sudden reassignment of your top clients to Marissa, with direct authorization from Fiona. The room blurred for a second. It was like watching a memory crack and collapse in real time. All the coincidences. The cold shoulders. The missing invites. The private jokes I wasn't in on anymore. I had thought it was just politics. But it was strategy. They didn't just exclude me. They replaced me. Piece by piece. And they used my closest friendship to do it. And then came the final blow. Grant opened a separate file labeled, Trust Activity, T. Morgan. My trust fund. The one my grandfather had set up. The one that wasn't to be touched until I turned 35, unless both I and a co-trustee signed off. But according to the file, substantial withdrawals had already been made. Tens of thousands. Then hundreds. What the hell? I breathed. They used someone's authorization, Grant said. Either forged, or someone with access mimicked your signature. We'll have to investigate further. But this is potential identity fraud. Everything in me went numb. They didn't just silence me. They looted me. My name. My future. My money. All compromised, all quietly erased while I was still trying to win their approval. That was the moment I stopped hoping they'd ever come around. The unraveling wasn't just of the company. It was of every illusion I'd ever held about who my family really was. It happened faster than I expected. Less than 24 hours after I handed over the documents, the storm started brewing. My phone lit up with messages from the SEC requesting follow-up files. Then came a call from one of my former assistants at the firm. Tess, it's chaos here. Your father and Fiona just left the office in a panic. Security's locking down files. They know something's happening. By noon, I had 5 missed calls from my mother, 6 from my father, and 2 long, emotionally charged voicemails from Fiona. And then, the message that told me everything had finally hit. You need to call us. Nah. You're making a mistake you can't undo. I didn't call. I waited. I sat on my living room couch, wrapped in an old college sweatshirt, drinking coffee that had long since gone cold, staring at the door like I knew it would knock. At 5:12 p.m., it did. I looked through the peephole and exhaled. All of them. Charles, Loretta, Fiona, and trailing behind, like the ghost of a life I no longer believed in, Marissa. I opened the door without a word. My father stepped in first. Face flushed, jaw clenched. My mother followed, spine rigid, eyes scanning the modest apartment like it offended her sensibilities. Fiona looked pale and anxious. Marissa wouldn't even meet my eyes. You've made your point, my father said, voice low but sharp. Now it's time to fix this. I didn't move. Fix what? You've sent files to the SEC. Do you even know what you've done? He hissed. Yes, I said calmly. I told the truth. My mother's voice cracked for the first time. This is a family matter, Tess. We handle things internally. Not like this. Not with investigators and subpoenas and public humiliation. I let out a bitter laugh. You humiliated me when you shut the door in my face. My father's face darkened. Don't make this about your hurt feelings. You don't understand what you're playing with. I'm not playing, I snapped. And I understand perfectly. You used client money to cover returns. You reassigned my clients. You used Marissa to spy on me. And now, you stole from my trust. My mother gasped like I had struck her. Fiona finally spoke. That wasn't me. I didn't know. Stop, I cut in. You were in on all of it. I saw the emails. Silence. Marissa finally looked up. Her voice trembled. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought. I was protecting you. I stared at her. You sat at my seat at Thanksgiving and watched them shut the door in my face. That wasn't protection. That was betrayal. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She just nodded, slowly, like someone accepting a sentence they knew they deserved. My father stepped forward. You have 24 hours to retract your claims. Otherwise, we will make this about you. Your access. Your knowledge. Your involvement. I smiled. That's the difference between us, I said softly. You're used to controlling the narrative. But this time, the truth speaks first. The door had barely closed behind them when my phone buzzed again. A message from Elijah. My cousin, the only one who'd ever treated me like a real human being. They're moving fast. Just overheard Charles in the boardroom saying they're prepping documents to shift blame. Legal's trying to make it look like you acted alone. Watch your back. I stared at the message. Not shocked. Just tired. It was exactly what I expected. The Morgans didn't admit fault. They redirected, reassigned, and buried. They had perfected the art of self-preservation. And now they were doing what they did best, scrambling to stay clean while the fire reached their feet. But they underestimated something. I'd been documenting everything. Every change in access. Every meeting I was excluded from. Every cryptic message and brush off. And now, with Grant and the SEC involved, they weren't the only ones with lawyers. I emailed a digital file titled, Timeline of Retaliation to Grant. It was 27 pages long, complete with timestamps, screenshots, and affidavits from 2 former employees who had reached out to me after hearing rumors of my dismissal. One of them had been laid off abruptly, right after he noticed discrepancies in the company's reporting software. Grant responded within minutes. This is solid. More than enough to demonstrate a pattern of concealment and manipulation. We'll open the next phase of the investigation tomorrow. Be ready. I was. Because I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. This wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. By nightfall, the fallout had started. A headline appeared on a regional business blog. Insider trouble at Morgan & Hunt? SEC inquiries stir corporate panic. An anonymous tip had gone out to a group of major clients, accompanied by heavily redacted but verified summaries of financial inconsistencies. Internal chaos spread through the firm. My assistant Bethany, who had quietly left the company months ago after seeing what was happening, messaged me. They're losing it. HR's pulling old records. IT is locking down drives. Fiona's crying in her office. I think they know it's over. But it wasn't. Not yet. At 10:17 p.m., I sent a series of emails to 3 of our largest investors. People I had built personal relationships with. People who trusted me, not the Morgan name. Each message included a summary of what I'd discovered, the steps I had taken, and a personal appeal. You placed your faith in a firm that abused it. You deserve better. I hope this truth reaches you before the damage gets worse. Within 30 minutes, one of them replied, "Thank you. I had a feeling something was off. Let me know how I can support the investigation." That was the moment it hit me. I wasn't alone in this anymore. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. Because when a house is built on secrets, all it takes is one woman with a flashlight. And I was done being in the dark. The next morning, the calls changed tone. Gone were the threats. Gone were the ultimatums. Now, they were bargaining. "We need to talk. There's a way to fix this. Together." Text from Fiona, 7:22 a.m. Tess, think carefully. The damage can still be limited. Don't burn the entire family down over a misunderstanding. Voicemail from my father, 8:03 a.m. I didn't respond to either. I was already at the SEC's satellite office in Atlanta, sitting across from Grant, reviewing documentation. The investigation had officially escalated. More subpoenas. A full audit. And now, media outlets were circling. But the most unexpected development came at noon. Grant leaned back in his chair, holding a document I hadn't seen yet. "Did you know your grandfather left you controlling interest in the Norton Trust shares?" My eyebrows shot up. "What? No. I thought those were under my parents' control until Fiona and I turned 35. He nodded. "That's what your father made it appear. But the legal structure shows otherwise. Upon your 30th birthday, the voting rights shifted to you." I sat there stunned. The Norton Trust was more than just a passive investment. It owned 18% of Morgan & Hunt's board voting stock. Which meant, if I aligned with even 1 or 2 disgruntled board members, I could vote my father out. The realization hit like a thunderclap. The daughter they cast out now held the power to take the firm back. That afternoon, I met privately with one of the board's more senior members, Judith Elkins, a sharp, principled woman who'd always treated me with quiet respect. She didn't waste time. "We know something's rotten. But your father has kept us in the dark for years. The others are nervous, but they'll follow leadership if it's strong, credible, and clean." She sipped her tea. "Are you willing to step in, Tess?" I didn't answer immediately. I thought about what it would mean. Rebuilding a company that had betrayed me. Leading a team that once ignored me. Putting my name back on something I had walked away from. But this time on my terms. I nodded. If it means protecting the clients, the employees, and restoring what this company was supposed to stand for, yes, I'll do it. That night, another headline appeared. Insider shareholder takes aim at Morgan & Hunt board control. And for the first time in decades, Charles Morgan didn't sleep easy. Because the daughter he shut out? She wasn't just knocking on the door anymore. She held the keys. The boardroom at Morgan & Hunt was colder than I remembered. Not the temperature, the atmosphere. Thick with tension. Silent stares. Half of the faces around the table couldn't meet my eyes. The other half couldn't look away. I stood at the head of the table. My father's chair. I didn't sit. To my right, Judith Elkins, calm and composed. To my left, 2 other board members who had quietly pledged their votes after reviewing the investigation's findings. Across from me, for the first time in his life, my father looked small. His suit was flawless, but his hands were clenched. His eyes darted from paper to paper, trying to find something, a hole, an escape route, maybe a weakness in me he could exploit. There wasn't one. The meeting began with a formal motion. Based on the findings provided to federal authorities, and under Section 9 of the board charter, Judith read aloud, this board moves to remove Charles Morgan from his position as CEO and suspend all executive authority pending legal review. The room held its breath. I looked at him then, not as a daughter, but as a woman who had once asked to be included, and was told to stay in her lane. He didn't speak. Not at first. Then he let out a bitter chuckle. "You think you've won something?" I tilted my head. "No. I think we've stopped something. He stood slowly, trying to reclaim control through posture alone. You don't understand what this company means. What we've built. This place, this name, it's ours. No, I said quietly. It was supposed to be ours. Built with integrity. Built for the people who trusted us. But you turned it into a shell game, a fraud built on fear and silence. That's not a legacy. That's a con. My mother was seated in the back, pale and silent, pearls clutched at her neck like a shield. Fiona wasn't there. Marissa had resigned the day before. She sent a single text. I'm sorry. Truly. But I don't expect forgiveness. I hadn't responded. The vote was taken. 4-1. Motion passed. Charles Morgan, my father, was stripped of power. And for a moment, the only sound in the room was the shuffling of papers as board members signed the resolution. He looked at me one last time, his voice low and venomous. You're not a Morgan anymore. I met his gaze evenly. I stopped being a Morgan the day you shut that door in my face. Then I sat in his chair. Not as revenge. But as repair. Not because I needed validation. But because someone had to rebuild what they broke. And this time, there would be transparency. There would be ethics. There would be consequences. The reckoning wasn't about burning it all down. It was about clearing the ground to build something better. And I was just getting started. The headlines hit like waves. Charles Morgan removed from Morgan & Hunt amid fraud allegations. SEC confirms criminal probe into Savannah's prestigious investment firm. Whistleblower identified as CEO's daughter. I watched it unfold from my apartment, curled up on the same couch where I'd once wept over a cold casserole. But this time, I wasn't broken. I was calm. Focused. Hollow maybe but whole. The firm entered restructuring within days. Client accounts were frozen for review. A new compliance board was appointed. I was asked to stay on, not in branding, not in PR, but as interim ethics oversight director. Funny title, right? The daughter they once dismissed for caring about fluff was now the one rebuilding the core. But as Morgan & Hunt began to repair, my family shattered. My father stopped speaking to me altogether. His attorney sent a formal notice that he was exploring legal recourse for character defamation. Grant told me to ignore it. The truth was well documented. My mother withdrew. She sold her shares quietly, retreated to the family's lake house in North Carolina, and stopped appearing in public. Savannah's social circles moved on without her. She still hadn't called. And Fiona? She surprised me. 3 weeks after the board vote, I found her waiting outside my building. No makeup. No blazer. Just a hoodie and a paper coffee cup shaking in her hand. I'm sorry, she said before I could speak. I let it happen. I wanted to prove myself to Dad so badly that I didn't stop to ask whether what we were doing was right. She looked up at me. Her eyes weren't cold anymore. They were tired. Human. I'm in therapy now, she added with a small laugh. Turns out having a conscience is exhausting. We sat on a park bench for over an hour. We didn't fix everything. But we started something. Something real. That night, I lit a candle in my apartment and pulled out an old photo. It was from a Thanksgiving 15 years ago. My parents smiling. Fiona holding the carving knife. Me in the middle, too young to know how fractured everything already was. I stared at that photo for a long time. I didn't cry. But I did grieve. Not for what I lost. But for the illusion that I'd ever truly belonged. In the weeks that followed, I began building my own team. Bethany, my old assistant, joined as operations director. Elijah, the cousin who had warned me, became lead strategist. We didn't call it a family business, but in many ways, it was. Chosen family. Built on trust. Earned. Not inherited. And one evening, as I sat around a mismatched dinner table with these new allies, laughing over takeout, debating campaign copy, I realized something. I hadn't lost a family. I'd traded it in for something better. Something honest. And that, I'd never let go. 1 year later, I stood in the kitchen of my new home, a modest brownstone tucked into a quiet street in Charleston. The air smelled of cinnamon and rosemary. The dining table was set for 8. The centerpiece was handmade. The wine was local. The turkey? A little overdone. And yet, it was perfect. I arranged a bouquet of sunflowers and wild eucalyptus, the kind my grandmother used to place in the center of her table. I looked out through the window, watching the golden light stretch across the courtyard. This Thanksgiving wasn't about presentation. It was about presence. One by one, my guests arrived. Bethany, carrying pecan tarts and her signature chaotic energy. Elijah, with a bottle of wine and spreadsheets tucked into his jacket pocket. Judith Elkins, who had quietly become both a mentor and an anchor. Grant Novak, freshly shaved for once, with his wife and toddler in tow. Even Fiona, who drove in from Savannah that morning, holding a dish I hadn't seen in years, our grandmother's cornbread stuffing. She handed it to me with a soft smile. Thought we could try again. From the middle this time, not the beginning. I didn't say anything. I just pulled her into a quiet, firm hug. We went around the table that evening, each sharing something we were grateful for. When it was my turn, I stood. I used to think legacy was something you inherited, I said. A name. A reputation. A seat at the table. But the truth is, legacy is what you build. Intentionally. Sometimes painfully. And often alone at first. I looked around. At this table are people who chose truth over comfort. Loyalty over silence. And integrity over appearances. You remind me that family isn't who shares your blood. It's who stands beside you when you speak your truth, even if it costs them something. I raised my glass. To the family we build. To the tables we reclaim. And to the peace that comes after the storm. Everyone clinked glasses, and for a moment, everything stilled. No more performances. No more secrets. Just connection. Later that night, after everyone had gone, I stood alone at the sink, washing dishes by hand. Not because I had to, but because it grounded me. Reminded me of how far I'd come. I thought about my father. The mansion in Savannah had been sold, the firm fully restructured. He now lived in near total silence, his name reduced to a footnote in a case study on corporate greed. I didn't miss him. But I did carry the lesson he left behind. Power without purpose will always collapse. But truth, when spoken with courage, creates something that lasts. This was never about destroying my family. It was about rebuilding myself. And this time, the legacy I leave behind will be mine.